Okay, let's talk about the skull. One of my favourite parts of the human body. So I'm going to try and keep this as short and sweet as I possibly can, though I might go on a little bit about some stuff. I'm going to do a few videos about the head. This one's going to be about the skull, and mainly the regions of the skull, and maybe with a few other little bits of information. And then we're going to do one about fats and deposits and that kind of stuff. Let's talk about the skull. You don't see it on this, but when you have Frank at the school, or if you've got something like this, I picked this up on Amazon 2 or 3 years ago for about a tenner. It literally is just Frank, but a little bit smaller. You can see that there are like what we call suture joints. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it's all the little like wiggly there you go, like all the like little wiggly lines over the head and stuff. These are called suture joints, and they literally separate different parts of the skull. And in the head, there are loads of different regions of the skull, loads of different like little bits. We're going to concentrate on big ones first. Well, at all. We're not going to do anything to do with the little annoying ones like the ethnoid and the sphenoid, all that kind of stuff. Nothing like that. We're going to the ones that only relate to our sculpting. So the first one we're going to start off with is, well, we're going to start off with the top of the head, and then we're going to start moving forward into the face. And the first one we're going to start off with, if I start off at the top of the head here, bang, and we start moving forward, is the frontal. I wonder why they call it that. And it's literally this region of the skull. So you wouldn't really see it from the back there, but look at that, and it's literally the front of the skull, or the front of the. It's called the frontal lobe, and you've got muscles there called the frontalis that obviously control the front. It's the front. Nice, easy name. We'll call it the frontal. There you go. Frontal. Now that's around this area here, unless you're carrying a lot of weight, the flesh to skull difference here is 2 or 3 millimeters at most. It's quite a thin area. You know, just a little bit of touching, you can feel the shape of your skull, and that's why I'm always going to be going on about people, you know, touching their own faces, touching their own heads, and feeling these regions of the head, because you'll be able to feel all this information you might not necessarily be aware of. So the frontal, very, very important. It's different from person to person as well. Ethnicities, age, genetics, all that kind of stuff. I've got quite a prominent frontal lobe here, so you can kind of see, even in this light here, you can kind of see it going around like there. There is an obvious shape. Some people have got much more flatter shapes there, so that's something we're going to have to look at and pay attention to, that kind of stuff. Moving down, then we get to the glabella, which you're not going to see on the back view there. So, and the glabella is literally this portion of the head right there. It's that point where you can feel your eyebrows end and going into your nose. Again, like everyone else. In fact, I'm going to try and say this once, but I might say it again and again. All of this are just big landmarks. They change from person to person. They differ from person to person. So the glabella is this ridge here, just underneath. There's a separation between your forehead and your nasal bone there. That's called your glabella. Glabella. There you go. Dead easy. Instead of moving down, we're going to move to the sides for now. And these aren't on any that I can find, any kind of like big books. These are more kind of like you see them a lot of like drawing books, because these are really nice regions, and I call them the horns, and I'm going to put them in a different colour. Let's put them in this light yellow here. So again, I can feel mine quite well because it's all down to the shape of this lobe here. If you've not got a lobe here, if you've got quite a smooth skull at the top, you're not really going to have this feature jump out. If you do have quite a shapely skull at the front, you're going to have this feature jump out. But yes, it's called your horns, and it's literally these little shapes there. And again, you're not really going to see them from the side there, but if I kind of draw it, it's basically the separation between this lobe wrapping round and then going into your eyebrows here. And they kind of look like horns, so I call them horns. I'll not put a name down for them because there is no actual name for them. Um, and then in this area as well, and this is if you feel around these skulls, and if you feel on yourself, I've got quite prominent ones myself, just on the inside, around here on your head, about there, you might be able to feel some like little bumpy ridges, just like it's like a centimeter from the middle of my, from the middle of my eyes there, about there. You got these two little bumps. Again, these are really nice landmarks to put in when you're sculpting because I started using these a couple of years ago, and it helped me really shape the skull in that area really quickly. And it's these little. You might see a lot of that in kind of like tattoo art as well. When people do like angry skulls, to make a skull frown, you can't make a skull frown, can you? But if you have these kind of little nubby things here, it kind of gives the impression of a frowning skull. And these all help to shape this whole area of your head here. So then, as we go down, we've got the nasal bone. Nasal ridge, nasal bone, nasal arch, nasal ridge, nasal whatever bridge. I'm going to call it nasal bone. It's your nasal, essentially. It's the top of your nose here. Anything further down from that is cartilage. So all this area here would be cartilage. So it's not actual bone. That's why it can sometimes rot away if people do a lot of drugs, like cocaine and stuff. It can rot away. It's not bone, though. It's also why you can kind of move it, and I don't like touching mine. It irks me out. So your nasal bone. Obviously, that's going to control the shape of your ridge of your nose right there. Even the width of it, the angle of it. Very, very important. And then when we go down, we've got the maxilla, but I call it the muzzle. This whole region here. I'm going to call it the muzzle, but I'll also write down maxilla. It's called the muzzle. But it's also called the maxilli. I think that's how you spell it. The maxilla, the muzzle. It's basically this lower region of the skull here. Very, very important because it's a really good way, when we understand and remember this portion of the face, it's a really good portion to remind us that this whole region of the face here, this cheek into nose into mouth area here, really helps to shape and define the cheeks, so that it doesn't. So it stops us having like really big puffy faces. That it's like if we're trying to do not a young child character, but our character still maintains this like really, really puffy face. It's probably because we're not shaping the cheeks right. So this region here especially is really, really important for that. Going further down from that, we've got the mandible, and I'm going to contain the whole thing in this. The mandible is one big bone. Obviously, it's here. Mandible. Your jawbone. Now, there's tons of bits in the mandible which are really, really important. One is obviously the chin, because it's, if you have a flat chin or a pointy chin or something like that, it's right there. It's also the back of the jaw here. If you want to make someone look very heroic and very kind of strong, you can give them a very strong jawline at the back there. If you want to make someone look very nice, very approachable, or maybe even soft and maybe not heroic, you can soften that jawline up a little bit. I'm not saying soften the jaw, I'm saying soften the shape. The jaw's always going to be that shape, it's always going to be a sharper shape, but then it's everything that's on top of it which makes that shape. Obviously fat deposits, muscles, and that kind of jazz. Sorry, the pause then. Right, so yeah, that's the mandible. Again, we'll go on about all the different things we can think about and use the mandible for. So we're going to go back up to the front region of the face, and this is the really important region of the face, probably the most important region of the head, because it controls so much shape of the head, all the shape of the head really. We've gone down the middle, we've gone down the frontal, then to the glabella, then to the nasal, to the maxilla muzzle, to the chin, the mandible. But then if we go to the side, here we go to the cheekbone, we go back to this horn region here, and we'll do this in a different colour, so do this in green. So you've got this region here, and I call this the orbital ridge. because that's the orbital socket is obviously where your eye socket lives. So I call this the orbital ridge because it's the upper section. And this, in junction with the frontal, the lobe, the glabella, these little horn sections, little nodey sections here, help shape that portion, this portion of our head so much. Or not shape it at all, you know, because maybe you have got someone like can't think off the top of my head. Someone who's not got that much kind of information around here. If you think of children, if you think of very soft featured models or anything like that, you know, they're not going to have massive big chunky eye ridges or anything like that, are they? Not at all. Or you know, in the case of kids, they just won't have that information there or develop. They might end up having that information developed later on, but as children, you know, they're more fat than muscle. So you got the orbital ridge there. Then you've got the lower orbital ridge here. And this is just as important because where this upper orbital ridge controls all the shape of your eyebrows, this lower orbital ridge is almost like a crossroads, a junction for everything that's then going into the cheeks and the chin and stuff. It's also a place where you can carefully feel. You might have already done this yourself, but if you feel just underneath your eye, you can feel the skin, the texture of the skin underneath is very soft, it's very moist, but then you can literally feel the start of fattier skin, fleshier skin right there. Now that separation point is literally that bone. So you can actually feel that skull, and then if you follow it around, you can go and take it up. You can feel maybe you've got a bit of a ridge around around here. You might have a little bit of a bumpy ridge. I've got quite a bony, bumpy ridge right there. You might not have. It's down to your skulls. But again, all this is going into making, you know, all the different angles of the face. I think it's why humans are so difficult to do, is because we're all weird angles. So that's the lower orbital ridge. And that's literally controlling both the upper eyelid, the lower eyelid, the lower shape of the jaw, but then going into the cheek. And we're not going to go over that in this video, because I could go on for hours about that. But then you got the lower orbital ridge. So back to green. No, back to... Let's go blue for this one. Go for here. So underneath your lower orbital ridge, then you've got the cheekbone section, which again, it's what shapes a lot of this region. So as we've been talking about this interior region as upper region, if we go a little bit further down, then we're talking about this region here. And again, if you carefully poke, you can feel this area here. How about there? Now, now all those are unnamed areas. They're all just stuff. Then we're going to go into some proper regions again. So, if we go to the side of the head here, we've got the zygomatic arch, which I'm going to... It's technically two pieces here, but I'm going to include all this bit to keep it simple. So it's all this region right here. It's called the zygomatic arch, and then we'll... This region here. Zygomatic arch. Oh, actually, you can see that little knobbly bit of the... If we go back to green, we can see that little knobbly bit of the upper orbital socket right there. A little knobbly bit. Again, it's why looking at heads or people from all these different angles is incredibly important, because some angles you don't see something. So yeah, zygomatic arch. Zygomatic arch. And yeah, that's this bit. And that is this region here. It's kind of what gives us the... It's protective structure in the skull, but it's what gives us the width of our head, which is really good. Now this region especially is one of the most important things to think about when dealing with skulls, this region. So you've got the zygomatic arch, which is giving you the width there, and you can actually feel that if you push back, it's basically in line with your ear hole. You can feel it, and then if you kind of go up a little bit, you might feel your skull begin to get a bit thinner. So if you know where your temples are, that's the next region we're going to talk about, and that's a really interesting region, and it's we'll put it in a different color just for now. It's this whole region. Now the reason why I had front and back for this is for this very reason. The temporal ridge, which is what this is, no, I can't put it there. I'll put it here. I'll put it in a color you can see. So the temporal ridge is the sides of your head. It's where your temples are. It's where you've got a few muscles that help you kind of control this portion of your head, help to chew and stuff. It's called a temporal ridge. There you go. Temporal ridge. But what's really important about it is its shape. So what a lot of people do when they first start drawing and sculpting characters or people is they tend to make this whole portion of the head the same width as everything else, or in fact make the whole front of the head wider than the back of the head. That's not the case. If I get my little mini Frank here, so he's looking downwards at the minute, so you can see that's the front of his head there. The back of the head, there we go, the back of the head is much larger than the front of the head. You see the front of the head gets thinner than the back of the head. And that's what a lot of people get wrong, because a lot of people, if we think about him still looking downwards, do that, where the back of the head is thin and the front of the head is wider. And then you wonder why it looks weird. And there's many different reasons why that might be, you could argue. Obviously knowledge is number one. But you can see there that it does get thinner around here. Now what we don't need to do when we're sculpting our bases, unless you're doing an actual skull, is to go in there and chisel out that temporal cavity there. We don't necessarily need to do that. We just need to realize that it thins out here. So what I tend to do is when I get my skull, when I get my sphere to sculpt, I basically cut off the two sides there and give it like a chamfer both sides, and that basically starts to create that temporal ridge around there. And then I can start to push and pull my cheekbones and my arches and my orbital sockets and stuff around. But that's a really important one to remember, and it's one of the very first areas that we tend to approach, is that area. So your temporal ridge. And I really, really need people to remember, just look at a skull. Like I said, these are about a tenner on Amazon. At least they were when I got it. Just look at the skull as a reference and think about the width. Bear in mind though that these scientific skulls are generally based around European Western skulls. Skulls are different from around the world. Even you find skulls from 50 years ago. They're a bit different from skulls of these days. Skulls change. It's because it's all based around genetics as well. Skulls will be different from person to person. If your diet is different, you might have different things. We all still have the same regions, but the structure, the way everything's scaled and stuff, might be slightly different. Okay, so the temporal ridge. Now we're moving on to things that are a little bit less important. Now we've got the parietal lobe. So we'll put that in pink. So the parietal lobe is basically the back of the head here. So if we're starting from the top again, it's all this region. That's a parietal. And technically it's split off into left. You've got left and right parietals. Again, they've got stupid Latin names for left and right, but left and right parietal. There you go. From the, I was going to say it does this. There you go. And if you look at these skulls, well, you'll be able to see where that kind of ends. So, well, technically the parietal kind of comes down to here. If I'm being honest, kind of comes like there. That's parietal. Again, there's nothing that much to worry about this if you're doing humans or realistic humans. Again, just like the top of the head, there's not really that much going on. When you get to the bit at the back of the head, that's where it starts to get a bit more interesting. Because if you've got a very athletic person, again, your body fat index is going to be low. You're not going to have much there. If you're doing a person who's got a bit more weight or a very muscly person, then you're going to have quite a lot of fat at the back of the neck, and that's where you'll start to lose some of the definition of that nice sharp back of the head. You're going to start getting fat rolls and stuff. So, that parietal section of the head, quite important just to keep in mind. It's nowhere near as important as the front of the face, obviously. And then the last one would be the occipital. Oh, so I'll parietal lobe. It's a lobe because it's a lobe. And then you got the occipital, which I'm going to put in green. And the occipital is this region of the skull. And it's characterized by this little lump that you can feel. And again, the same jazz as the parietal lobe, depending on the health of the character, the weight of the character, the muscularity of the character. This might be completely overshadowed by fat rolls or by muscle, or it might be quite defined. If you're doing someone who's got hair, obviously you're going to lose it altogether. If you're doing a person who's got a hat on, obviously you're going to lose it altogether. But it's something to do. It's something, again, to keep in mind when you're doing this kind of stuff, because it's such an important section. And it's called the occipital. Occipital. Yeah, so that's that bit. The occipital. Very important. All these regions are important. The front of the face is the most important, because that's where obviously all our characters are going to look. All our players are going to look, and all our characters are going to be speaking from. But all these regions mix in with each other. They all blend with each other. Don't forget any of these regions. If you forget about the zygomatic arch, everything's going to look weird. If you forget about the occipital, the back of the head's going to look weird. If you get about the parietal, your head's going to be misshapen. All these things, everything has evolved to respect each other. And one reason why the occipital is very important is because it's a really good landmark to then go into the head. Because I used to see a lot of people draw heads where the spine was coming out the back of the skull, like this. But no, the spine comes out the bottom of the skull, like this. It's why we have so much good range with our heads, is because our pivot point is basically in the middle of our head, which allows us to have complete range of motion. And your occipital plays a big part in that shape. If we think less about the scientific element of things and think more about the subjective character design and character modeling side of things, that occipital section there is just a really good way to show, a person's athleticness. If you're doing like a really skeezy, thin, greasy character who's maybe not got a lot of hair, maybe if you give him like a really thin neck and a bony occipital, it's adding sharper edges to a character. But then if you want to do like a really friendly, chubby Canadian lumberjack, maybe you want to get rid of that occipital. You hide it in rolls of soft fat. All these things are incredibly important. I realise I'm just wandering off camera. But that's basically it. That's all the reasons of the skull we're going to look at the beginning. A few of these areas are things that you'll see in more art drawing books rather than anatomical books. Stuff like the little two nodes there, the little horn sections there. These are more like shapes, forms, rather than regions of the skull. Why that is because if you look at a skull, and if you look at all those suture joints we're talking about, some of these aren't actually defined by any suture joints. So they would be, if you take the front lobe off, it's going to take, the front lobe would actually take, if I get white out for this, the front lobe takes like all that section away. Just all this upper section, which includes the glabella, which includes our orbital ridges, which includes our horns, our nodes and stuff. So what we're talking about here is forms. But it's good to know about these regions of the skull because they develop to create shape. Developed and have created shape. It's a combination of the two. So I'll be making a neater version of this without my daubings on it. But that's basically it for this area. Again, I don't want to go too much into detail. Not that I would go any deeper into this anyway. There's not much else I would be going on about now. Ear position is there. That's where your ear hole is. Even your ear doesn't go directly into it. It kind of goes in and down like that. stuff like teeth and that kind of stuff. I mean, minor stuff. The stuff we won't be going on about is the, like I said at the beginning, the ethanoid and the sphenoid bone clusters, which are inside the eye socket, and you'll never see them. But no, we'll leave it like that. And like I said, I'll do a neater version. But try and remember that when you're looking at the skulls, when you're looking at Franks, I have got Disco Frank obviously, which has all these regions painted, all the skull regions anyway. And if you're just looking at people, try and look at people and try and see these regions. It's all very, very interesting, and hopefully over time you'll be able to see these regions a lot more in people's faces, and even underneath, fat deposits and people who are a bit more heavier or muscular, maybe you'll still be able to see these forms because you'll know how the underlying structure is then impacting the surface on top of it. Cool. So the next thing we're going to be talking about in the next video is we've got the skull here, but then what goes on top of that, the muscle structures, the fat deposits, and the fleshier regions of the face, because all that is incredibly important to then shape the face. Because just having a skull is fine, but then everything that goes on top is just as important. So I'll see you in the next one. I will see you in the next one.